Hey there! Our final lecture will be a short lecture looking at the large intestine, everything from small intestine on. So let's do it. Now it's large because of the diameter, not because of how long it is. And then it roughly forms kind of a window frame, or like this. Kind of goes around the small intestines being in the center. And its whole purpose, we're not absorbing our nutrients anymore. It's going to reclaim the water and electrolytes. So you pumped in so much water and all those juices, all liters and liters of water from your saliva to your stomach and your intestines. So all that is going to come into the large intestine being like a milkshake, very watery. And then your large intestine, mostly through osmosis, is going to suck that water back. Take the salts, the water will follow, and you end up just with the feces. Just the waste is going to have just the minimum amount of water that you can get rid of, and you'll reclaim all that water. Colon and large intestine are synonyms. They mean the same thing. So your colon or large intestine, I'll use both of those. So the chyme will enter the fluid from your ileum, the last part of your large intestine, last part of your small intestine, the ileum, into your large intestine, again, as very fluid. And then that fluid will continue on. Now remember, there's a valve right there, the ileocecal valve, that's going to keep fluid going from the small to large intestine. You don't want it to go backwards. So the large intestine reabsorbs water and electrolytes. You're going to see we get some vitamins because it's filled with bacteria. And I'll talk more about that. How many bacteria, more than your body cells, inhabits your colon. And it helps actually break down some of the indigestible things and provides some vitamins even, vitamin K. And the large intestine will store the waste until you want to get rid of it. Anatomy-wise, you start out in this end. I'll just draw it for you. This is going to be the cecum. The cecum is this like pouch-like sac, and off of it will come your appendix. It's a little vermiform appendix. It's a worm-like appendix. You all heard of it. And then this will be your ascending colon, because it's going up. Then your transverse colon, it's going to go across. And then your descending colon will come down. Then when it gets like to your pelvic brim there, it gets kind of S-shaped. We call it the sigmoid colon. And then lastly, the straight part would be called the rectum. Remember, rectus abdominis, rectus femoris. Rectus means straight, kind of straight. And the anal canal will just be the last inch or two, just a little bit at the very end right there. So ascending, transverse, descending, sigmoid, then a rectum, anal canal. Up here you can see we call this these little where it changes direction there. Sometimes we call this the hepatic flexure and the splenic flexure, right? Because your liver's here and your spleen's here. They're kind of tacked up right there. And this transverse part often sags down right there. But people are really variable. Sometimes it won't be square like that. It'll cut across. Yeah. But this is generally how it goes. Now, the unusual thing about your large intestine with the muscle-wise is that the circular muscle is still there. But the longitudinal muscle, instead of being smoothly around the whole tube, it's concentrated in these three kind of stripes that run along it. And so you can see these kind of stripes right here. Here's one that you see, and there's a couple others. What it kind of does is it kind of puckers the intestine into these little haustra, they're called, these little like sacs. So it looks like this instead of just looking like a single tube. And off of the large intestine, you store fat in these little, used to call them appendices epiploica, or little appendages. You store fat in these little like tags that come off your large intestine. And we'll see the muscles, the way it moves, you kind of have these mass movements. Instead of peristalsis always kind of moving the fluid down, just a few times a day, it all just kind of moves like in a big movement. It's a little different like that. All right. You guys know what this is? These are pellets of drugs. So they do these x-rays for people, drug mules that are trying to carry drugs through the airlines and condoms or something so they don't burst like that. But you can see this large intestine, instead of being the nice squares, kind of takes a shortcut like that. So everyone's a little bit different. The large intestine doesn't have the villi. You don't need all that surface area. And you have tons of mucus cells, goblet cells. So lots of mucus because you're just moving the waste along. You want to lubricate it, move it along. So if you look at it here, tons of goblet cells. The muscle layer, remember, is a little different. Circular is the same, but longitudinal is kind of concentrated in these 3 stripes. So by this time, again, if we're just looking at it, digestion, no. By that time, you've taken all you want out of it. You've absorbed it in your small intestine. But you've got to take back your water and your electrolytes because you put so much water into it. And if you have diarrhea, you have too much water. And it's one way of your body getting rid of, if you're sick, of getting rid of creatures in your gut that you don't want. You can just like wash them out like that. If you want to encourage that watery feces, you can take things like blanking on the name, but you can take material that stays in your large intestine and it's not absorbed, and so it's going to keep the water with it. So osmosis can't pull it out if you have a bunch of material that's like stays in there, solutes. So there's that. Tons and tons of mucus, like I say, you're just lubricating things. And amazingly, this intestinal flora, all these bacteria, and you keep them inside of your body there, and they will, we don't have any enzymes to break down cellulose, which is all plants have. And so bacteria do have cellulase to break it down. And so we'll keep them there, and they will have the ability to break down some of our bacteria. The bacteria breaks down some of our cellulose. And they're going to form the feces. Eventually, that'll be our waste that will be concentrated and stored for defecation, is when we get rid of that intestinal waste. So indeed, talking about that, your large intestine has these mass movements. Here they are. And often you take a meal and your whole large intestine moves the waste to make room for the new, and it kind of moves it along right there. And as a video on this defecation reflex, like we did micturition, urination, this would be defecation. You've got a muscle here that kind of keeps the severe angle here, and if you relax that muscle, it's going to straighten it out and allow the feces to move out. And then we'll see we've got sphincters here, internal, and the internal smooth muscle, you don't control that. But then you have an external anal sphincter, just like the urethra, and that is part of skeletal muscle. You do control that. So large intestine is going to move things along a little bit differently. It's going to move slow enough so you can take back that water and the bacteria can work on it. And let's take a look at this reflex.
The presence of food in the stomach and chyme in the duodenum stimulates mass movements in the colon. Mass movements are integrated by the enteric plexus. They propel the contents of the colon toward the rectum. The presence of feces in the rectum stimulates parasympathetic and local reflexes that result in defecation.
All right, so the part that you don't digest, and again, you can't digest any cellulose. Is plant. There's a plant polysaccharide that it's so common, but we just don't have the enzyme. Bacteria do, and but that cellulose makes up the bulk, like fiber. You want to have fiber in your diet. It'll help prevent colon cancer too, because it moves things along. And the more bulk in your feces, it gets rid of cholesterol too, because that moves it along and makes for a healthier diet. So you hear about eating cellulose. This is non-digestible material. You're also feeding your gut bacteria, your large intestine bacteria, and that's I'll have a slide on that. It's really interesting about how the bacteria is important to your health. So we're just learning a lot of this. Feces, yes, the picture, I used a kitten. I didn't know exactly what you wanted there. But this is going to be the waste, the things you don't digest. And a lot of it, remember, is a quarter of it is like epithelial cells that are coming down. It's bacteria, it's cellulose, it's the non-digestible parts that your intestines couldn't do anything with. The color comes from biopigments that have been worked on by bacteria. So sometimes it's a clue to health, looking at fecal samples. Yeah, but it's going to be about 75% water. It's the binding together of the indigestible, the cells that have sloughed off, and the bacteria that you get rid of. And the bacteria divide so rapidly, and they're being fed by your food that you always make new bacteria, but you get rid of it with this waste. A couple diseases. This inflammatory bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease. There's several types, and there's a lot of talk about gluten sensitivity and Crohn's disease. I think I'll talk about also is one type of it, and you have diverticulitis, where you actually have pouches that form in your intestine. And the Crohn's disease often gives this kind of cobblestone appearance. And it can happen in your large intestine or even up into your small intestine. And parts of your intestine die, and you end up with like living and dead parts. And so it causes a lot of abdominal pain. And they're not 100% sure what causes it, interestingly enough. They're still looking at it. But it could be an autoimmune type disease. Anyway, for those of you afflicted by it or family members, you can look more into that. So colon cancer is, in fact, second. I haven't looked at make sure that's still the case, but it's a deadly one because it often will remain unnoticed, and as it grows and it grows. And it's not a problem if it's just going to be in the epithelial tissue and it grows, but eventually at a certain stage, it's going to break through the wall of the colon, and then it can metastasize. Like I say, it often goes to the liver. You know why, right? Because remember, the portal system goes from the intestine to the liver, so it will carry those cancer cells, and they'll be stuck in the liver and start growing there, or to the brain, to the bone. So colon cancer is a big killer. And that's why at age 50, I won't tell you my age, but at age 50, they recommend still a colonoscopy. And this may be going away because they can do a fecal occult test. They can look at feces and they can get DNA that goes along and see if it's cancerous to do it that way. They can do some imaging techniques. But old-fashioned, they have you drink this horrible liquid that makes you just crap out everything. It cleans your intestines. They force you to drink this liquid until there's nothing in your colon. And then you go in the next day and they stick a camera up your butt and they look in there. And the good thing is if they find something, they can remove it right away because they're already in there. Other imaging techniques, if they find something, then they got to go in a second time. Well, they got to go in and fix it. So it's recommended about age 50. Earlier, if you have like family history, and if you're clean, no problem. They say wait another 10 years at least, you know. So, but they can catch these slow-growing cancers early, no problem. They can just remove it. But if it goes unnoticed, you'll often have changes in your feces or blood sometimes. Then by the time it's big enough, then it can spread. And so that's the deal. You want to catch it early, remove it. So it's very important people pay attention to this. All right, and finally, just talk about our digestion. We'll talk about diet next and nutrition, things like that. But just overall, our stomach, what are humans? We talked about the teeth. We're kind of omnivores. We eat plants and animals. And then, you know, a cow just eats plants, and your cat just eats animals. So there's between a carnivore, a herbivore, and an omnivore we are. And so when you look at digestive tracts, stomachs, and intestines, herbivores always need a bigger gut because when you eat plant material, it's low quality, right? Most of it's indigestible. If you eat meat, that's high quality. You can convert all that protein right into useful things. So when you look at the gut of here's a coyote versus a koala eats just eucalyptus leaves, and that's just tons of fiber, very little nutrients, especially that we could digest. So when you guys eat plants, I mean, sure, fruits have a lot of sugars and water and vitamins, but the cell walls that make up a salad or broccoli, that is all fiber that we can count on our bacteria. But if our large intestine's not long enough, it doesn't spend enough time. It's just going to be waste. But something like this koala, you can see, has a huge cecum and appendix, and they take the plant material, they make it spend lots of time in the gut, so bacteria can work on it, and then we can digest the bacteria and the products that come from it. And a carnivore has a short gut, simple short gut, because it's easy to digest. It doesn't need as much time. And so we have symbiotic bacteria that live in our guts. Now, we're not born with that, but in the process of birth and anything in the environment are going to seed our gut to that bacteria inside of it. Will start growing, and there's competition. Only certain bacteria will end up beating out the others inside your gut. And if you add a bad guy, he drinks some bad water somewhere, that bacteria can affect your normal bacteria and make you sick, right? And then you can take probiotics. You can eat certain yogurts that are going to kind of seed that. And in fact, there's grossly enough fecal transplants where you have the bacteria from a healthy person put into a person with certain kinds of irritable bowel problems, and it's hopefully populate it with healthy bacteria. So our gut bacteria we found is much more important than we had thought in the past. And animals have there's two groups of herbivores out there. Cows are foregut fermenters. They have huge, multiple stomachs. It's like a huge vat. And in there is bacteria that grows in this. It's water. It smells like grass, this big vat. And they throw it up, they chew it, they swallow it again, and then their intestine is normal. So they occasionally wash out the stomach, parts of it, and then the small intestine can absorb the nutrients from the bacteria. And you see the size of a cow's stomach. And here's that fistula I mentioned, like the Beaumont's guy had, where you can look in the stomach and do some experiments. On the other hand is a horse, which is completely different. It has a normal stomach, and then it has a huge colon, huge large intestine. And so they are hindgut fermenters. So they use the bacteria in their colon. Now we have a problem with that, don't we? Because remember, absorption takes place in the small intestine, and we can't go backwards, right? And so their large intestine has some adaptations so they can absorb these nutrients. But that's the purpose. Our appendix is small and vestigial, but it's huge, huge appendix, huge colon, and these herbivores like rabbits and horses and creatures that are going to have to ferment this plant material. They need the bacteria to do it for them. And so there's a huge push. Like my office mate, Dave Grimm, he has a class looking at the gut-brain axis. And you say, what? Believe it or not, your gut secretes more serotonin than your brain. And so this idea of your mood and your health being tied to your bacterial biome is just something that's going to explode in your guys' lifetime. It's just being studied now. There's some fascinating research being done. A lot of it's made easier because we can identify bacteria just by looking at their DNA now. We're getting better at it, quicker at it, so we can do this. But some of this research is they have babies, parents send in their diaper like every week, and you can look over time, babies in different environments, at their bacteria in their gut. And how does that affect their later health, their mental health? Like, that's really, really, really cool. So your gut bacteria may outnumber your human cells 3-1, and can have a big influence on your health and disease. We're just scratching the surface of this. So you guys in your lifetime will have a lot more about this. It wasn't really looked at before, but your gut bacteria, if you get sick, you understand, you screwed up the balance of your bacteria in your gut. And now we're looking at how your gut is seeded early on and who wins out in this competition of gut bacteria can have a lot of influence on health, disease, and mood. You can look into it. All right, my battery's running out here. That's good timing. This is just a chart for you to look at where the different proteins and fats and carbs, where they are broken down by what enzymes and where it happens. So I just thought it was kind of useful. So lifestyle changes. Usually your gut is not the one that's going to kill you compared to your heart or your kidneys or your lungs, right? So with time, your teeth, the enamel wears, and you get more periodontal disease, more recession. You lose teeth, and that can kill people if they can't have a proper diet, right? Indeed. Uh, your stomach and your intestines also change. You often have more heartburn, more digestive constipation issues like that. Dry mouth called xerostomia is very common in elderly. And we think it's a lot to do with all the medications. A lot of medications cause this. And as you get older, you take more and more medications. But that's another thing. But normally your liver, it's got so much excess because you can donate half your liver and be fine. And your pancreas too. You only need a small amount of your pancreas to survive. So those things you don't notice any difference as those shrink over time. So your digestive system usually is going to last your lifetime, not going to be what kills you. All right, class. Digestive system. I have a test on digestive system. We had a number of lectures.